Hey everybody, it's Dr. Heather Deniston with the Junk You Should Know show. And with me today is Tamar Hermes, and she is from Los Angeles. And she has been kind enough to join us today to talk about wealth and wellness. We're going to hit that topic hard, as scary as it might be for some of you to talk about money. We're going to for quite a while, I think. So I'm going to just, before I get into, thank you. First of all, thank you, Tamar, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about her background in just a minute. Actually, because it's so interesting, I'm going to share it right now. So you were a real estate investor, first of all, and you had a company called Worker Bee Management, and then you went on to Littlefoot Enterprises. Is that correct?
Well, Littlefoot actually happened before that, and
Okay.
Littlefoot, and then I created Worker Bee.
Okay, and what I loved about Littlefoot Enterprises is many of you parents have heard of Sekai Run shoes, and I think that was one of your brands. Is that right?
It was actually, yes, it was. I didn't create Sekai Run, but I ran and supported building that whole company for 13 years. Alongside companies, retail companies. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that's great. But what you do now, you consider yourself the chief wealth warrior, and you help primarily women with their relationship with money. Is that a good sum up of kind of what you do?
It is. I mean, I like to look, because I have a business background, I always like to look at the mindset issues around money, also with the practical side of it. Because I feel like if you have the mindset, but you don't have the practical, or vice versa, then things are going to be missing. You might have money, but not feel that happy, or you might not have money and not know why, and not know how to get it because you're not educated.
Okay. I love that. I have thought more about this episode of the Junk You Should Know show than any other episode. And the reason is I realized, because I have my own baggage around money, and I shared with you, this was a tough one for me to go, how are we going to talk about this without alienating some people and making people feel uncomfortable? But I decided, you know what, we got to do it anyway. And this is probably what you do. You're like, yeah, let's get uncomfortable. Let's talk about it. And so I'm glad that we're doing it, as scary as it is a little bit. I don't know if the rest of you out there are like, we shouldn't talk about money. Nobody talks about money. It's like, yep, we're going to, because particularly with women in business, we gotta get with this relationship with money. We gotta understand, like you said, the practicalities, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also the other thing is that even, this whole idea of vulnerability right now, and obviously having money or not having money can bring up vulnerability for us. And even Brene Brown is talking a lot about one of the best ways to work through money issues is to talk about it and to have that conversation where you can start working through some of the things going on in your mind, and also to ask practical questions, because there's a lot of confusion around it, just practically speaking too.
Yeah, there are. It was funny. I was listening to a podcast from Brooke Castillo yesterday, and she starts it out by saying, I love money. And she talks about how, I bet that makes so many of you feel uncomfortable. And she did a good job talking about it. And it made me want to bring a couple points up, which we'll talk about later. But the other thing I did in my research is I was reading this article from the Yoga Journal, and it had this, because I always think a lot of times, like wellness folks, yoga instructors, meditation, those kinds of things. That's not a place that you're going to be talking about how much money you're making. But in fact, there was a great quote from the yoga article where it talked about, and I don't know how to say whether this is artha or artha, as part of their meaningful portions to their life. She says, having money to live on, to care for your family, to do the good of the world that you want to see, we have to ask several questions. Where do I place value? Do I have enough? Are my things making me happy or stealing joy? Am I afraid of having more money or less money? What does wealth mean to me besides money, and when is enough? I thought those were great questions. These are probably questions you ask your folks all the time, is to start having that conversation, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing, just in that conversation around these questions is also the idea that is accepting that that money is part of our lives, and that regardless of, whether you're a yoga instructor or whatever service you're providing to the world, it doesn't mean that it can't go along with money. It's almost like somehow in society we've been taught, people with money are a certain way. They wear suits, they don't exercise, they don't care about this or that. They're just out for themselves. And people that are good don't have money. And if you have money, then you're on that side. But that's not what it is. And so I love the article that you bring up. Also, the idea of just money being a part of one of these segments in life that enable us to live, to survive, and that it's embracing it, and that it's not at all a negative thing.
Yeah. A place that I read was talking about how money is actually, we just have already said good, bad, good, bad. Well, money is actually neutral. It's nothing. It's who's using it that where the issue becomes. So I think that's a very foundational principle that we have to teach people, is that when you look at a pile of $100 bills, they are not good or bad. They are neutral.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what happens is that, when we add the meaning, just like with anything, we're always adding meaning to things. So as soon as we start adding the meaning and it's not a positive message that we're giving ourselves, all of a sudden, what are we creating with the money? It makes us feel all of these negative emotions around it. And it also makes it hard to live with it and to really enjoy certain aspects of our lives, even from just a comfort level of, having a comfortable house, having enough to eat, having, sending your kids to college at a more sophisticated level where we need to have more finances.
Yeah, that's good. So you alluded to this. There's a climate, particularly right now with wealth, that many people are like greed and selfishness. And it's funny because I really was evaluating myself in those situations, and I thought, oh my word, I have found myself in conversations downplaying my financial status because I'm worried of the impression people will have. Mm-hmm. And so it's, what do you find are some common misconceptions around finances and wealth, and conversations around like, well, wealthy people are stingy and they're greedy and they only are out for themselves. How do you deal with that when you're kind of talking to new clients?
Well, I think that this is something that comes up a lot for a lot of people, whether or not, we're in a situation like where we are, where we're financially comfortable or where we don't have enough. It's that feeling that we give to it, and that, and then what happens are, to create what we want to create for our lives. Mm-hmm. And so some of the things that come up are, when someone says, I feel uncomfortable because I have money. Mm-hmm. I really try to ask them, what is it that they're really looking at? Like, to have the conversation around that. Like, what is it about that? I know for me, it comes up for me a lot in terms of asking for things, because I feel so dedicated to helping other people, but at the same time, I'm still running a business. So sometimes I do have to ask for payment. I do have to ask for colleagues to support me. And sometimes I feel like I'm being selfish, that gene, like, don't I have enough? So getting into that situation, the best thing that the best tool that I it really kind of helps me move forward powerfully and know, hey, I'm giving, but I'm also receiving as well.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's good. Some might wonder how health and wellness can be related, and that's sort of the crux of our subject today, is because I want it's it would be silly not to talk about the stress of finances and our thoughts around money as it pertains to our wellness. Mm-hmm. So obviously, the basics of not having enough money plays into, well, you can't buy organic food and you can't join that amazing gym or hire that amazing trainer. Those are obvious. But are there any other places where you see, our thoughts and ideas around money, that how it can affect our wellness?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question that, if you feel like funds are tight or you feel like you're not capable of taking care of your house or making enough money, that you're going to not feel good about yourself. And as soon as that happens, you stop working out, you stop caring about your diet. And it's just this downward spiral in terms of, what you can create. So there's that. I mean, that would be the main, that's the thing that I think comes up, just in terms of, how are you treating your body, which is your vehicle to be able to be in the world, to be able to energize, to be able to connect with others, to be able to have a business, have transactions, be a good employee, where you feel in your job, but also you're doing good work, where you're focused. It affects your energy level. So there's all kinds of things where, and I think one of the things that's important where you were talking about is, as far as when you said, joining the best gym and all the things that we think about, like, oh, well, I can't join the gym, so I can't, have a good, be in good health or good fitness. Exactly. It is BS, because the truth is, no matter where you are, you can create it. I mean, in fact, some of the best workouts are free. So
for sure.
Cost anything to go running, right? So I mean, all that stuff gets into our head, thinking that, and that's when we make money mean things. And not, and that's what you want to work through in actionable steps. So in other words, you start getting into your mind like, oh, I don't want to get up. What's the point? I'm never going to lose those 10 pounds. It's to just get up, because that's the same thing that's going to motivate you to be able to create more money, to know that you can do things, to participate in the world the way that you want to, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think you just brought up a good point, and that is that when we can see success in things like wellness pursuits and being successful at something small, like working, like maybe a small step toward working out consistently, you start to kind of promote success in your life. Wins beget wins, and that will translate also over into your finances and your ability to create wealth. And I think that's key. And I know you bring that up a lot, is, wherever you're successful in life, that can translate into how you can be successful in winning money. So I think that's really, really key. I do also think that when we are under constant stress because we don't have enough, and don't have enough either means you're living beyond your means, or you really legitimately are not creating enough wealth in your life to support where you are. And either of those ends up being a fight or flight response constantly, which is a disaster on the body. And so I think that is probably the biggest factor, and relationships, that's the most common thing argued about, right? And so relationship balance, fight or flight, constant dynamic of cortisol dumping and just stress on the body, those two things are huge. And so we can't not talk about wealth in relationship to wellness. So I think that's really good that you brought that up. Now, what about people's fear that we're kind of alluding to this, but that fear of not having enough? How do we coach past that? Like, many people talk about this is one of their biggest stressors, and how do we, I think one of the things that Brent and I went through about 5 or 6 years ago in our marriage that was very helpful was we decided what was enough. When was enough? We decided actual number. What was enough? And whether that's a monthly number or a retirement number. So what do you think about that?
I think it's huge. I think, at the crux of almost every human being, there's this feeling like, I'm not lovable or I'm not enough at some level, because we're in the world, let's face it, and we're not perfect. And there's going to be something, especially when we go into childhood, which is where a lot of these money feelings originate, that we start to get into a situation where we are in that mind frame where we can get triggered of not enough. And I do think that it's great that you took that on with your husband to figure out, what is enough, so that you can start to own it and have a number and have a
Yes.
realistic, that comes into that practical part where like, yeah, you can manifest and you can create all kinds of income. But if you don't know if you're not letting yourself ground into what's enough and how are we balancing this, then there's always that feeling of the money leaving
Yes.
or of not really. A lot of times with clients, what I hear more often than not is, I'll say, well, what did your month look like? Or what did this look like? Or where are you at? When I start working with people and they'll say, I don't know. So they don't know, they don't write it down. So of course they feel that I'm that panic of not enough. Now the other side of it is where you're actually not generating enough, and where you're not. I really invite anyone that's in that space is to just expand what you really want to have for your life, because that's really what it comes down to. I mean, at a certain point, you're the one that has to step up, just like with wellness, just like, there's a huge epidemic with people not being able to take care of their bodies. It's the same thing with money. It's just stepping up and saying, I am going to make this work, and then getting to it.
That's really good. We talk about the worthiness issue. We also just sort of covered that, but one thing I want to play on is when somebody comes in with and sometimes they don't even know that's what it is, but it comes down to, I don't think I deserve it. I don't think I'm worthy. Where do you encourage them to work? Is that on like finding out where is that coming from? Or is there a method that you kind of help them to get to that and figure out how to get past that part of it?
Yeah, there's several methods and several tools that I use to get through that. And definitely one of the key places to start is to look at where those messages are coming from, because that obviously not feeling worthy of the money comes from someplace along the journey in life that somehow something happened and you made it mean that you didn't deserve it. And because the truth is that on a rational level, if we're all standing together, we're all human, and we're all pretty much on a certain level, we have a lot of similarities as humans. And we've seen, people like myself that grew up with nothing and now is in a very solid financial situation. We see that all the time. I mean, Oprah's like that. So, I mean, we've seen proof. Hey, I know I can do this. There's no reason. So at a certain point, as a human, like, where is it that you don't feel worthy, and what is it that you're not allowing yourself to be human about? Because that's really what it comes down to. Because we're all mistakes.
And I think that comes to a good point that you and I were alluding to earlier, which is the idea of value, that most of us associate money with time and effort. That's very, very limiting, because you only have so much time and you can only put in so much effort, right? It's the idea of what are you putting out into the world that is of value? And you just used Oprah as an example. Oprah doesn't have any more hours in the day, and yet she is one of the wealthiest people on the planet. It's because she has put something out that people find very valuable. And so this is probably a big part of you working with entrepreneurial women is, what's your value? What are you putting out there that's of value?
It's huge. It's huge. And it really comes from, I mean, even before you put out your value, is finding your value. I mean, that's your worth. That's who you are. That's what you bring to the table. And so it's critical once you find, okay, yeah, I get it. I get it. I'm a person on this planet. Everybody has something to contribute. And when you can tap into whether you're an employee working for someone and contributing to a company, whatever you're doing, that is the more that you shine with that, the more you contribute to that, the more that you will be compensated for it. And if you're in a situation where you're not, then, all it is the universe telling you, hey, time to pivot, time to look at more of that inner value that I can put out into the world.
Yeah,
and
I like that.
Yeah, and that really also is the exact reason why I do the work that I do now. Because I saw, growing up poor, I saw, okay, I can invest in real estate, I can invest in this and that and make money. I can run businesses, I can contribute in different ways as a parent and with everything that I do. But then at a certain point, I really wanted to tap more into that value. And for me, that value was about being a financial coach and making sure other people
Yeah.
can see how they can grow as big as they want to be financially.
Yeah, I think that is important. And I do think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel like women have limiting factors around money more than men do, at least in the conversations I've had. And so I think that's a really, really important thing to start to work with women in women's groups and different business groups and things like that, that the conversation around money has to happen more and more and more so we get more and more comfortable with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also diving in, just like, sitting down, deciding what is enough and actually looking at the numbers. There's there's a lot of barriers to looking at the numbers. It's almost like it's the same thing. Like when I have my, students in Wealth Warrior Workshop, when I say, okay, we're going to, and I make it really easy. And so we go through the numbers, and once they do it, they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And it's kind of thing. And when you get into a routine with it and it's scheduled, it's the same thing working out, right? It's the same kind of thing. The first time, like if you haven't worked out in months, it's like, oh God, like there's no way I can get out there. But then once you start doing it, or even like cutting certain foods out of your diet, like I cut sugar out a while ago. Now I don't even, when I taste something sugar, it tastes so sweet to me. I repel it. But at first I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot give up sugar. I love sugar.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. And I think too, you what is that movie? The Secret. I have some feelings around that movie. I don't know if you like it or don't like it, but for those of you that have seen it, it's talking a lot about visualization and manifestation and all of that. What it doesn't talk about, which is what you just said, is the practical application and the action behind it. So we've got the two parts to money. It's how do we think about it and talk about it, and what are our beliefs around it? Where does that come from? Going way back to what our parents taught us about money. And then the second piece is you've got to get in and be able to do the practical application. We spend more time planning our trips than we do sitting down with our finances. And so I think your encouragement to no, let's sit down. This is not as hard as you think it is incredible. It's super amazing.
Yeah, and I see it make a big difference. I mean, anytime that we can really be accountable and just dive in. Like I've had several clients where there's debt, and I mean, let's face it, it's a huge conversation, and most people do run with some debt, and being able to get rid of that for so many of my clients is so liberating. And it's a lot of times they'll say, they'll avoid it. They'll say they're going to work on something. Then the following week, I'll ask how it went. And then they said they didn't do it. And it's just that feeling of like, oh, they don't want to face it. And it's also, there's shame around that. And let's face it, it's huge. And there shouldn't be, because I mean, we're human and we're on the planet, that's what we do. We're managing, and a credit card helps us manage things sometimes. But
and shame is it's never a useful emotion.
Right. Exactly. It is not a useful emotion. It does not move forward. And then as soon as, and the way to combat that, of course, is to get into action and actually take, I have a client recently that just finally, paid off the credit cards and took care of some debt that had been around for a long time. And she feels so much better and light and empowered. And, the other thing that I talk about just as an add-on is, a lot of times people are saving a little bit of, 401k or whatever. They have their 401k account, but they're running a debt. And so I always my feeling about it is I just look at the practical numbers. And what I always like to tell people is like, let's look at the numbers in terms of what to do. And oftentimes, if you're paying a 20 to 30% interest rate on a credit card, there's no point in saving money in a 401k.
And there are some simple foundational principles that I think well, I'm going to date myself, but in the 70s and 80s, our parents were taught how to manage their finances in a certain way, and they passed that down. And unless you have done the work to undo some of that misconception about, make sure you're always saving, even though you have debt, I've always been debt-free before anything else. That's sort of something to live by. But I run into a lot of people who are like, well, that my student loan is only this percent. And it's like, there's a freedom, first of all, in becoming debt free, but also that there's a practicality. And like you say, when you pencil out the numbers, oftentimes you are, what is feeding Paul to, what's the saying? I can't even remember.
To robbing,
Yeah.
feed Mary, or something like that.
Yeah. I don't, but yeah, taking from something to give to something else to no positive effect.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes for sure, I think there are times where, you do, you do maybe put an expense on a credit card because it's really important and you can see that it's going to pay off. But I think within reason, I think there needs to be barriers. And it wasn't, this definitely isn't a debt conversation. This is about money, but it's something to think about, where could you find yourself disempowered around money? And, the same thing happens in terms of our wellness. And I really find that the two definitely go hand in hand, and that anyone that isn't making the amount of money that they want, but is really masterful in wellness, can use all of that, because to be a master of wellness and to be disciplined, you can use those exact tools to create the income that you want, the exact ones.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's a good balance between the two as well. And I think when what you just said made me think of a point. When we are well, one of my biggest wellness why is I want to be able to jump off a cliff in New Zealand at 75. I want to be able to launch my overhead bag into the overhead bin at 90. And what that comes down to is choices. I want to be an older person with choices, and wealth is about choices, isn't it? I know when you have feelings and emotions around it, that may be something you need to deal with, but in the end, wealth provides choices. And whether that means you want to give it all away, or you want to make sure your kids never have to pay for college, or you want it for your own life experience, it's choices. And so I think that's a big factor we have to contend with when we are having these emotions around finances and money.
Absolutely. And it may not, and just going back to the ARPA, right? Which is that you need to decide what it means to you. And not everybody aspires to or even lives the lifestyle where they need to have that level of income. It's just a matter of what is enough. And the main thing is to really let yourself have freedom around the money, because the freedom is in terms of how it comes to you, and that you will be able to receive it, and that you will be able to ask for it, and that it will flow for you is so critical, because feeling in that limited space, and especially for women, you talked about, yes, women definitely more so, we feel this because we haven't been in the work world as long as men. And so we definitely, these are definitely exercises that we want, muscles that we want to work with in terms of expanding ourselves for how much money we really want, and how can we really bring the value to create that in the world. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to bring up too that somebody had taught me was the whole idea that some of us may not even know that you have an attitude that is this: if I make tons of money, somehow that is taking it from someone else. Like there is this limited pie of wealth in the world, and it's going to get divvied up, and I want to make sure everybody gets enough and their fair share. But we have to come to the point where there is no wealth. Wealth is only created, and there's no limit to that creation. And so I'm curious, those that are listening, have you thought about that? Are you of the mindset that wealth is a limited resource, or are you of the mindset that we can constantly be generating and creating wealth in our own lives and in lives of the others? So what do you think about that, Tamar?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something, especially that women come up with, because we're nurturers, we're the mamas. And so, we want to make sure, the tribe is fed, and the community is fed, and the children are fed even before ourselves. Yeah. And so definitely it does feel like in our mind, it gets created like there's never going to be enough, and that there's limited resources. And that if I have, that somehow Heather's not going to have. Yeah. And it's true. It's not real. I mean, because we know that, that there's an infinite amount, that if somebody is paying me, that they can also make more money. In fact, the more that you open yourself up to what you're charging and what you're getting paid, the more you're generating in the world at a higher level. Like if I have a company with 8 employees, well, those are 8 employees that are all getting paid. They're going out and spending money. They're going to go, they can contribute more. I can give more to nonprofits so that it expands. So in fact, having more actually, instead of thinking it as when you have it, you're taking it from somebody else. When you have it, you can give it to someone else. Is really more the way that you want to really be looking and aiming setting your sights.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think too, we have a language around money, I got to borrow, I need money, I got to find some money. This scarcity mentality around money that I think plays in our minds and then affects our attitudes around money. So I think at the very minimum, those of you guys that are listening, what's your language around money? Do you talk about creating and expansion and that kind of thing? Or are you talking about, I got to find some more money, I've got to, what do you coach people in regard to that, Tamar?
I always say, watch what you say. And, it comes back to that whole, watch your words, they become your character, watch your character becomes your destiny, watch your destiny is your life. That saying, because the thing is that it's true. And even I catch myself, as much as I, work in this full time and I'm constantly working on bettering myself and learning more and helping more people with their wealth. I even find that even little words, I was speaking with someone yesterday and I had said, oh, so you just have 3 in your company. And I thought, wait, what a limiting way to say it. I didn't mean to say you just have 3. That is a way of making it negative. And it should have been, wow, and you have 3 and it's amazing what you can do. So you see in little nuances how that can come up when you don't even mean it that way. But what is that I would even, it's a conditioning. It's the way that we say it, but it does affect into the world. And even like with money, there's many manifestors that talk about like every time you see a penny on the street or every time you get paid, to bless that money, to thank that money. It's the whole thing, that whole positive energy. I talk about that too with my work. There's definitely, appreciating the money that comes to you and being positive. And that is all part of your language. Because if somebody gives you a couple $1,000s and you say, God, thank you, the universe, thank you everything for making my life work the way I want it to work and for bringing this wonderful money to me. That's all. Then that goes out. Then when you're speaking to other people, and if you feel like, wow, I want to create more money, then you can say, I want to create more money, not I need more. Or short on this, just like, oh, how am I going to generate? So you can even hear it in the shift.
You can.
And also if you're speaking to somebody, how that lands. Because when I speak to you, when I say it in that way, you're definitely more open to wanting to invite me in.
Yeah, I think that's true. I remember being at a chiropractic conference and it was a 5-day intensive, and partway through he walked through the crowd he had handfuls of $100 bills. And he walked through and he didn't say anything, just kind of walked through the aisles, and he got back up to the front and he said, you should have seen some of your body language. People just like kind of freaking out about hundreds and hundreds of dollars in somebody's hands, and then other people being totally okay with it, feeling very comfortable with that much money. And, and it really brought to light how we have a very deep, innate sort of default feeling about money that we might have to tap into if we want money and wealth to look different in our life.
Absolutely. And, no matter what level you're at, when you're expanding into the next level of, wherever you're at, there's always going to be the next mountain to climb. And that's exhilarating, so we can see it as, okay, where's the opportunity there? As opposed to seeing it the other way. But definitely when you that's an exercise actually I work with my Wealth Warrior workshop too, about looking at money and seeing money and how do you relate to it, and energetically how do you take it in. And the more comfortable you get with it and the more that you kind of neutralize it, think of that exchange and the value, the more that you can generate more and have more of what you want. But I say, don't limit your vision of what you want because you don't feel like you can, you're going to be able to earn that money. Like, set your sight on what you really want, because it's a lot easier to get there with that vision solid, as opposed to just saying, well, this would be okay. It's okay to say this would be good, this would be better, this would be the best, but it's important to have that to like you said, to climb that mountain and to be kind of seeing it. Seeing the
Yeah, I think that's good. Tamar, tell us a little bit, as we start to wind down, tell us a little bit about your Wealth Warrior program.
Sure. So the Wealth Warrior Workshop is a program that I created for 9 weeks, and it goes for a consecutive 9 weeks because I like to get into the rhythm of the money conversation, and what's really powerful is the group dynamic, is being, like we talk about, being able to talk about money and seeing somebody else go through something, and we see ourselves in other people, and it's usually a smaller sized group. And so it's very intimate, and there's room for coaching in there. Right. And we walk through not only the worth, the shame, the actionable resilience, the desire, and we also look at money systems and also investment opportunities, and where do you put your money and what makes sense, and just being in the conversation of being empowered around money, being a wealth warrior. At the end, we do, there's different stages that everyone goes through each week. And each level that you climb gets you to wealth warrior status at the end of 9 weeks. Yeah. That's
great. Well, we'll put your information below for sure, your links and that kind of thing. I want to just sum up. We've been talking about wealth and wellness together and how the two are connected. And I think you did a great job of talking to us about how when we have inappropriate feelings and beliefs around money, that is definitely going to cause stress. When we are either living beyond our means or we are not making enough for the lifestyle that we're looking for, that is going to cause stress. And the fact that money and wealth provide choice and opportunity that aren't there otherwise. It's just it doesn't make you happy. It doesn't make you sad. It's neutral, but it does provide opportunity and choice. Anything else that we missed as far as summing up, and any other discussion points we had said we were going to talk about?
I mean, the one thing that comes up for me is just remembering to honor wherever you're at, and don't make yourself wrong for not having the amount that you want. Most of us, I mean, when you ask people, do you want more money? Most people aren't going to say no. Yeah. I mean, even if you don't want it, you can give it away to somebody and feed homeless. I mean, yes. Why wouldn't you want money? So there's always this feeling, yes, and owning that and being okay with that, and realizing that, we come into the world and there are certain things that we want to provide for ourselves, and there's a certain life, but be happy with where you are at each stage as you're climbing the mountain. Like you're climbing the mountain, and each peak that you get to, just kind of take a breath there and just be like, hey, okay, I'm here and this is great. And then just keep climbing. And it's amazing once you start living with more and more money, and as it starts coming, you start to get into a relationship with it where it doesn't feel as intimidating. It doesn't feel as scary. It doesn't feel like a negative thing. And you can say just like what you were saying at the beginning, I love money. I like to say money is the seed that waters growth. You know? That's
great. That's really great. Tamar, thank you so much. I so appreciate you being here. I think this has been really wonderful. We're going to put some sum up stuff down below and some links. And guys, as you know, we're here every Friday at noon PST, but we live forever on the Well Fit and Fed YouTube channel. So do check that out. Subscribe so that you can get your weekly dose of the Junk You Should Know show. And Tamar and I'm sure you will be back again at some point to wow us with your financial prowess. And so we'll check off, but I want to make sure, Tamar, stay on for a bit so I can thank you and everybody else. If you're watching live or in replay, I'm so blessed and thankful that you joined me today, and we will see you guys all again soon. Peace out. Bye-bye.